Well, good morning, everyone, and again, welcome to my regular updates from the Capitol. First, on two sober notes. One, I want to express my condolences to the two young members of the Israeli delegation who were brutally murdered last night on the streets of the District of Columbia. Huge sympathy for their families, and obviously there is no place anywhere in America for this kind of violence. It appears, at least from press reports, that the shooter was politically motivated, and I think we all need to continue to be united in standing up against these acts of anti-Semitism. I think we have to be concerned about acts of Islamophobia, and in a time when tensions around the world are so high, we have to do all we can to show unity and also to show support for the members of the Jewish community, not only across the region but across the country, who feel fear and under assault. I also, this was obviously a topic more of yesterday, but want to again express my condolences to the Connolly family for the passing of Jerry Connolly. I've knew Jerry for more than 35 years. He was a great friend. He was a great co-fighter. As I said to a number of folks, if you wanted to be in a political battle, the guy you wanted next to you in that foxhole was Jerry Connolly. He was tough, he was pugnacious, but he always did it a certain amount of humor, but also he let you know what he felt. And there is not, particularly in Fairfax County, there's not a park, a hiking trail, a road, an economic development benefit, a program that Jerry Connolly, in his many years of service, from being a supervisor to chair of the Fairfax board, to one of the most influential congressmen in the country, that Jerry didn't touch. And particularly for the DMV audience, and not just DMV, there was no stronger fighter for federal workers. And with the level of assault that federal workers are under at this point, it is, they've lost a champion, and it's going to be incumbent upon me and Tim and other members of the delegation on both sides of the river to continue to stand up for our federal workers as they get, frankly, terrorized and traumatized. Not my words, words of the OMB director, Russell Vought. We have to stand up for these workers. I mean, again, I've said this 1,000 times, but the idea that, to the Elon Musk types, these are not interchangeable coders that you can fire one and replace them right away. And we see you lose the expertise at the FAA, you lose air traffic controllers. Air traffic is less safe. You lose key folks in the intelligence community, fire young spies, America's less safe. You lose folks who do our food inspection, and you make sure that our food supply is less safe. This chainsaw massacre approach to federal workers continues, and I know if Jerry was still with us, he would be at the bulwarks with us fighting against this. The two more immediate issues. It appears, again, in the dead of night, the House eked out this big bill, nothing beautiful about it. It is a bill that I think will do remarkable damage. You've already seen the bond market get extremely spooked because of the amount of money that is added to the debt is scaring the bond market. Why? Because people then say, well, if America can't pay its bills, then maybe I want a higher interest rate on buying, for example, Treasury notes, which are simply IOUs from the United States of America. We've seen the bond market as recently as yesterday. They regularly sell America's debt through Treasury notes, and we didn't have enough buyers to show up. That will drive interest rates up. That will end up meaning higher rates for home mortgages, higher rates for car loans, anything that has debt, a business that wants to expand course, I'm not sure any business is going to expand with the overhang of the crazy Trump tariffs. What this bill does, though, is just devastating to Virginia. About 248,000 Virginians will lose health care, whether they are on Medicaid, and a lot of them, I'll come back to that in a moment, or if they say, well, I don't have to worry, I'm not on Medicaid, I actually buy my health insurance through the marketplace, through the Obamacare exchanges. Well, one of the things they got in here is that this is going to drive up those of you who buy on the exchange your rates 200, 300%. And this will come due just about November when we actually have state elections. And if we don't get some of this fixed in the Senate and those rates go up 5-fold or 10-fold, remember where that came from. Didn't come from outer space. It came from this big, awful bill that Donald Trump has put forward. I've already cited other things in the bill. I think rural hospitals will shut down, and even if your hospital doesn't shut down, already in wide swaths of Virginia, it's hard to find a hospital that will provide OBGYN delivery services. Do we really want it in Virginia where you've got to drive a couple hundred miles to deliver a baby? I mean, that is a giant step backwards. If you're looking at some of the things that the effects of some of the cuts in this bill on medical research, do we really think America should be less innovative? If you're thinking about something as basic as the ability for folks and kids to go to school not hungry, this bill makes dramatic cuts in kids' breakfasts, school lunch programs. Does anybody really think a hungry kid is going to learn better? But this is all baked in to this giant mass bill that I'm going to do everything I can in the Senate to either stop or dramatically reform. I've talked to my Republican friends about this, and will be interesting to see. And then, kind of the basic premise, though, of this is the recent estimates indicate that if you're on minimum wage anywhere in America, and if you're on minimum wage, chances are you may have to even be working 2 jobs to make ends meet, you're going to see your taxes go up estimated 53%. If you're at the high end of earners, that top tenth of 1%, you're going to get a tax break about a minimum of $188,000. And if you're really super wealthy, you could see a tax break, exponentially higher. That's just not right. It's just not fair. I got nothing against people who are successful in our society. I believe in our capitalism system, but there ought to be a responsibility to pay you a fair share, and to get such a tax break when rural hospitals and, for example, OBGYN services are shutting down, just isn't the kind of America that I think most of us believe in. And frankly, I don't even think that's the kind of America that most of the folks who voted for Mr. Trump actually want to have happen. But that will come out of this legislation. Final point is I've been hugely concerned since the whole Elon Musk Doge Bros effort to come into our federal agencies. I've been concerned about the random cuts they have been implementing. But I've also been hugely concerned as a former tech guy about their ability to kind of punch a thumb drive into our massive databases and suck that information out. Whether it's your Social Security information, your tax information, your personal information. There are existing rules to say you can't abuse government information, but we have no idea how much information is being exfiltrated out that could end up going to the financial advantage of some of the tech guys who are part of this process. So our Doge Bros bill dramatically increases the fines if this private information is somehow taken from the federal government and misused. That may not affect Mr. Musk. He's the wealthiest man in the world. But I hope for some of these 22-year-old Doge Bros, they will think twice before stealing that information. And that's what it will be, illegally exfiltrating information, so that if they are found guilty of that, they will pay a heavy financial burden. So whether that bill gets through, there's an awful lot of my Republican friends who have expressed concern about this. I hope they'll have the courage to actually co-sponsor the legislation along with me, Tim Kaine, and a number of others, and actually put some real serious consequences in place. With that, why don't I turn it over to Laura and be happy to take your questions.
Senator, our first question is Tom Fitzgerald with Fox 5.
Senator, good morning. I wanted to circle back to your opening comment regards to the incident last night, the attack at the Capitol Jewish Museum. There have long been concerns, Senator, as you know, that either lone wolf or organized outside interests would try to launch domestic attacks here in the United States. Is there any intelligence on that? Should people be concerned that we could be looking at either inspired acts or organized acts moving forward?
Well, Tom, as you know, unfortunately, we've seen, I think back to a case of a military officer, I think down in Texas a number of years back, that was a lone wolf inspired, inspired by terrorists. We've seen similar actions in California a number of years back. Thank God we've not seen as many in recent years, but we've seen horrific images come out of the Middle East now, starting with October 7th and in the aftermath. And while we've seen no intelligence indication of a dramatic tick up in threats, we got to be vigilant, and that's the challenge when you have a lone wolf. My understanding, at least from the police reports from D.C., this individual had no prior record. At least that was what was reported last night. But it is so hard for law enforcement and the intelligence community if someone becomes inspired off of what they read on the internet or what they see. It's awful hard to prevent that ahead of time if they are truly a lone wolf. It's why we all have to be vigilant. It's also why I hope, both in terms of the rise of anti-Semitism, thank goodness I've seen some data that's shown that has decreased somewhat in terms of incidents since, particularly the very violent protests over a year ago at schools like Columbia. But also we have to bear in mind as well, we've also seen tick up in actions against Muslim Americans as well. I think we need to condemn all forms of hate and religious-based bigotry. But the lone wolf incidents are really tough, one, to predict and two, to prevent.
Senator, our next question is Charlie Pollen with Virginia Business.
Hey, Senator, thanks for doing this. Just wanted to ask you about the freezing of funds for the rural broadband effort. Is there any other way to kind of connect these folks that are in Southwest Virginia and Central Virginia and these mountainous, rural, remote areas without this funding?
Well, one, great question. And this has been a passion of mine. As a former telecom guy, broadband deployment isn't going to guarantee your community success, but failure to have that at a high-speed, affordable rate means you're not going to have a chance to prosper at all. And I'm really proud of the fact that Virginia is further ahead, candidly, because Governor Northam, the previous governor, took $500 million and what was called the ARPA funds. I was able to provide another $220 million from a Treasury program. And so Virginia has made a huge dent in some of that rural deployment. The program we're talking about been frozen is called the BEAD program. We had $42 billion that was put in for rural deployment. Matter of fact, I thought, appropriately deployed, if we don't have that money deployed by, say, 27 or 28, it was failure of execution. And unfortunately, to a degree, and this is where I critique the Biden administration, we passed the infrastructure bill in the first year of the term. They didn't get the money out for the next 3+ years. And in Virginia, we had actually gotten an award about $1.5 billion. We were sitting pretty. But the fact that it didn't get out, and now this new administration, which tries to erase everything that the previous administration did that was good, has put a freeze on this funding. I'm afraid that the Commerce Department may try to scoop that back and frankly ignore Congress's wishes. So we've put in letters to the Secretary of Commerce. We are trying to put as much pressure as possible. This is not a Virginia-only issue. Awful lot of red states have got a lot of rural communities, but it would be outrageous and would hurt America's economy if we don't get those dollars released and let that broadband fiber be deployed. I worry, and I say this as someone that was a big advocate for wireless, I worry that this may be one other example where government policy is being bent to provide benefit to an Elon Musk company. Starlink provides some level of rural deployment. I've got nothing against satellite-based or wireless-based deployment, but even as a wireless guy, I know fiber is a better long-term solution, and I'm fearful that these rules, this money is being held up so that, again, potentially Mr. Musk could even find another way to profit from his participation in this administration.
Senator, our next question is Elizabeth Beyer with the Cardinal News.
Hi, Senator. Thank you so much for your time today. A little bit of an off-topic question, but what are your thoughts on the 3 Republican congressmen who represent Western Virginia forming their own interview committee to fill the U.S. Attorney seat for the Western District?
You know, I'm disappointed. I've worked well with all of our Republican House members. We take a lot of input from those members. The idea that they're setting up a separate partisan review is not the way the process works. It disappoints me. I hope the White House, and again, Tim Kaine and I work very quickly. We know President Trump won. You know, he ought to get his right to pick people. We went through a thorough bipartisan review process, recommended somebody from both the Eastern District and the Western District. We've already heard back from the White House. They thought our process was very good. We realized we had to recommend people that would have been, you know, supporters of Mr. Trump, so there's no political bias here. And yeah, I kind of scratch my head about it. You know, I hope at the end of the day the White House is going to rely upon the same process that every White House, including the first Trump administration, where the sitting senators review candidates, make recommendations. White House then gets to choose their own person, of course. But if they somehow try to go around the historic process where senators make those recommendations, it would be a huge step backwards.
Senator, our final question is Emily Harrison with 13 News Now.
Hello, Senator. Thank you for meeting up with us. I have a bit of a left field question regarding TRADOC and specifically kind of its role in Hampton Roads. There's been a lot of concern about this merge between Virginia and Texas, and I know now that there's a lot of talk about how operations will still continue in Hampton Roads, but still there's a lot of concern in this area. Have you heard about this merge? What is your take on it so far?
Yeah, I've heard about this proposed merger. I've not been fully briefed. I know the whole delegation, Hampton Roads, the Peninsula, bipartisan. I know I've heard from Bobby Scott, Jen Kiggins, Rob Whitman. Senator Kaine and I are both concerned. We expect a full briefing. I think there are extraordinary values of having TRADOC operation in Hampton Roads because it works closely with the other commands that are there. And so I want to get the facts first before I weigh in, but if this is simply a political move to try to move a military command away from the kind of synergy they have with other commands that are in Hampton Roads, I'll fight it tooth and nail. And I hope the governor and the General Assembly weighs in as well. This is not partisan. This is about Virginia, but it's also about the official and effectiveness of our armed forces. There is value that is created when you have these commands close to each other. And I mean, it kind of goes to the question. So I'm looking into it. I'm very concerned. I want to see the data and I want to see the reasoning, but I'm hugely suspicious that this may be politically motivated. I'd also just quickly add, this is the kind of craziness that's coming out of the new FBI director, Kash Patel, where he said he's going to arbitrarily pick, I think, 1,500 people out of headquarters and move them around with no basics of why, other than the fact that maybe to try to make the FBI less efficient. And again, this is the same FBI director who, prior to becoming FBI director, now there's a little bit of a tangent, but it just kind of what makes my head explode. You know, there is a very important component of our security laws called Section 702 that allows the government, with appropriate cause, to watch and listen to foreigners abroad who potentially pose national security risks. Kash Patel, before he became FBI director, was concerned about government overuse or misuse of this tool. There was a group set up inside the FBI to monitor, to make sure that the rules are followed, and we went through a series of reforms on this. I guess I was not surprised, but you know, the hypocrisy knows no bounds, that now that he's the FBI director, Director Patel has suddenly said that group that's supposed to be monitoring abuses of Section 702, he's disbanding. What's changed other than the fact that he can now see how this very valuable tool could be potentially used for political purposes? That is outrageous. And again, I hope people across law enforcement, and again, I hope my Republican friends will find their voice and say, you know, particularly since we've got to renew Section 702 next year, that is a bad decision and ought to not be followed. I know that's a long answer to a TRADOC question, but it's like there are so many things happening right now that are so crazy, that are so inefficient, that go against, you know, saving taxpayer money, and frankly, that are just plain mean-spirited, that it's pretty damn stunning. And gosh, I was hoping I was going to end on a positive note, but all right, everybody, take care and have a safe Memorial Day weekend.